welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I was thinking about last night's podcast and the cultural influence of firearms, like what we need to improve the cultural influence of firearms. And I started thinking about the guns you should have in your collection as you're trying to be an ambassador of the 2A. I know it sounds cheesy as hell, but we've all introduced someone to firearms. If we've, there's some person, whether it's a girlfriend, a kid, one of your close friends, someone at work that has been interested but didn't have access to a firearm, and they convinced you to go shooting on a trip. In that vein, I thought of the four categories we should have these types of guns in our collection, because it helps spread the 2A in a weird way, because either you're training with these guns or you're letting people shoot them so that you can get them farther into the 2A or destigmatize the 2A to these people. First on my list was a rimfire of some kind. Now, a lot of people would say nowadays the 17 HMR. I'm not a big fan of the 17, mostly because of the price of the ammunition. I'm a huge fan of still the 22 long rifle. Now, I've had multiple 22 rifles in my life. The ones I still have are Savage Model 60 and a Ruger 1022. I recommend the Ruger because of parts compatibility, but the Savage is just as Savage Model 60 is still one of the most popular guns there is. You can find them all over. You can buy one cheaply. You can buy them used cheaper. But the reason why I recommend the 22 is, one, there's no recoil. Two, it's fun. Three, it's economical. So you can go out shooting with anybody or even yourself, and you've got a ton of ammunition in a little 500 round box that should be around $40 nowadays. It used to be around $10, but I digress. When you start talking about the 22, I recommend the 22 pistol also. So I have a Mark II 22 pistol and an SR 22 22 pistol. Both I see as steps to like a Glock pistol. Before you hand someone a defensive pistol like your Glock or your SIG or your 1911, you want to see what the response is going to be with a pistol. So it's a good idea to use a 22 because of all those reasons I said before, but this gives them a little bit of a recoil impulse with a pistol, because a 22 pistol still recoils more than a 22 long rifle or a 22 rifle. And why that's a thing is then it gives you an idea of if you hand them a 9mm or a 380 or a 45 or a 357 Magnum or so on and so forth, how they're going to deal with it. You can use it to train them or to teach them grip on a pistol, because most of the problems with shooting pistols usually has to do with grip and trigger pull. If you can fix those before they're ever an issue with a 22, it saves on ammunition. It also saves on time. It also is just a great way to start. Now, I've killed a lot of rabbits and squirrels with my Mark II pistol. I've used it to hunt before I actually got into rifles, in the 22, that is. So I recommend a 22 first off to be part of your collection as a 2A ambassador, as someone, you should have a 22 anyway. But it's not a bad idea or a bad plan to have one like a Rascal or a Cricket, so you can start teaching little kids. And I'm not advocating for you to go training. I'm talking about people in passing you've talked to who seem to be interested in guns, and they're decent enough people when you talk to them that you actually think about inviting them out on a shoot. And I encourage you to do so, because that's how you change people's minds about the 2A. Next are what New Mexico Black Rifle Operators was designed to do to defend the 2A is a black rifle. Now, today is 308 day. That's why I have the PTR 91 on there. But I recommend an AR-15 or an AK in your collection. And I can tell you firsthand, taking people that are totally anti-2A but aren't shitheads when you talk to them, okay? I've met several of them in education as I worked with them that are totally anti-gun. And then you take them, you invite them out on after a couple cups of coffee, you invite them out to go shooting, and you put one of these guns in their hand. Not the 308 if they're brand new to the 2A. That one's a little spicy. But the other one's mild recoil, fun to shoot. But what instantly happened in all three cases where I've had people that were anti-2A and were all about banning these types of weapons is just being civil and talking to them. We went out shooting one-on-one, because you don't want to have a lot of people around you when you're exposing a new person to the 2A. That's kind of why I want to meet them head-to-head before I ever just take them out and start shooting, around them. Because, let's be honest, we want to be safe. 2, ammunition isn't getting any cheaper. And 3, you don't want to scare the hell out of them, okay? A one-on-one setting, you end up in a very personable environment like a coffee shop would be if you went and had a cup of coffee with them. And what happens in the case of the AR-15 and the Kalashnikov is more often than not, they realize the media is lying to them. First question I get is, where's the full semi-automatic? That's one that I think was hilarious. And it lets me know that they're a media drone that's never actually picked up a gun or never was exposed to a gun, and they're just toting a party line. Midway through the session, it is inevitable that these people that are so anti-2A, unless they are so blinded, and if they're that blinded, they won't even bother going to the range with you, they flip. I've had dyed-in-the-wool women who are totally anti-gun, totally anti-everything I am. But we found some common ground in just conversation, and I invited them out and said, hey, before you demonize and stigmatize something, let's go out and let me show you what it really is. Because you are dramatically uninformed on what you're talking about. And she took to the AR-15, and the first words out of her mind was, I've been lied to. Holy crap, this is not what they've said. First, it wasn't full semi-automatic or fully automatic of any kind. 2, what really surprised them was how useful it was. This person was not a shooter, as you can imagine if they're a dyed-in-the-wool leftist. And they realized that you could, in fact, there was an argument for this gun. Because she was putting targets, hitting cans and hitting bottles and I like to take watermelons out. And what I usually do for soda cans, I take them out. Of course, I collect all of them before I leave, because I have too many friends that go out and collect, clean up in the wild, because they're jeepers and they're awesome, like Alan. But they sat there and they got on target, and they were hitting very precisely. Now, that could be because it's my rifle and it's zeroed, but that's a testament of how rugged and durable the AR or the AK are, is you can once they're zeroed, you can hand them to someone and well-maintained, and you can run them through the paces of safety first. Do that with all firearms. And that's how you can also tell if they've been exposed to the firearm in any way. Exposed to firearms in any way, that is. But what happens is, or in this case, she said, I've been lied to, because this is not the weapon that they say on TV. This is not the weapon the media portrays. Yeah, it's intimidating looking, but it's a pussycat when you shoot it. If you shoot an AR, okay, this is why it's America's rifle, in my opinion. One, the military uses it, so the ammunition's fairly inexpensive, or was. They keep making that harder and harder to get. But I think we're in a downturn now, so the prices will go back down for ammunition. Two, it's one of those video game guns that as you're going, or not, I keep saying two, one of the other things is it's a video game gun. And if you're exposed to kids or you're exposed to young adults who play video games, this is a gun they're very familiar with in a video game. So why would they want to shoot it? They want the experience. But once you get past those little hiccups, more often than not, there's a change. Now, I threw the PTR in there because it's one of my favorite black rifles, and today is .308. The next gun I think you should check out, man, I hate OBS sometimes, is a shotgun. Now, I have 410 and 12 gauge, and I picked hunting shotguns here, but most of my shotguns, well, the one I have, well, the two I have a single shot 410. That's for someone like a kid, or that's also for someone who's dyed in the wool that they want to shoot a shotgun. I'm not one of those people that'll take a slug or a heavier round, a heavier load for the 12 gauge. Mine are all 3-inch chamberings, and throw it in there while they're shooting because I don't believe in scaring someone or punishing them. But what happens in the video game crowd is, I noticed this with my son, my youngest son. They want a shotgun because they're in every video game. And in video games, my sons have told me, I'm not a gamer, not anymore. I mean, way back, like Tetris style I was, and first Call of Duty. But they're overpowered, is what my son was telling me. And he wanted to see what a 12 gauge would do. He was, like 10. And he was determined to see what Dad's shotgun would do, since he's seen what they do in video games. Now, mine aren't semi-automatic. I like pump shotguns, mostly because of their reliability, and I'm a reliability guy. But it also is a good test for those people that say they want a 12 gauge for home defense. If they've been influenced by boomer fuds, they always have been told that racking the slide is all you need to do to deter someone from entering your home or from attacking you. And I'm of the volition that if you have a shotgun, it should be just like your carry pistol, cocked and locked and ready to go if it's home defense. That said, there's some safety concerns with a cocked and locked shotgun. I know this for a fact, you can load a Mossberg 500 and let it sit there for a long time. However, without compressing the magazine spring. However, I've not had an ND, but I've seen it in practice that if the gun is tilted or falls to the side, there's nothing holding that hammer from a side jar. And what usually happens is it'll discharge. Now, what I have had happen is not an ND, because the gun was unloaded, but I've had in cleaning with my little guys when they were little, the gun fell from the side, and I had cleaned it, cleared it, everything was cool, safe, and it had dropped. And my guns are usually pretty rugged, and I heard it go click, and that's when I realized what was going on. Okay, now that doesn't sound like that's a big deal, and it probably isn't if you're safe at handling your firearms, but it's something to be aware of. But the recoil impulse, people that say they want a shotgun for home defense, this is a great way when they tell you that, and they will if you're their gun person. And I've been a gun person for a lot of people. And I've exposed a lot of people to the 2A just by having conversations. And this is inevitably what happens is they say, I want to shoot a shotgun. Some people are dissuaded right away. Once they shoot 12 gauge and the recoil impulse kicks in, They're instantly dissuaded and say, no, I don't want a shotgun for home defense now. Now I want something different. This is not what I was told. The last one on the category list that I would actually recommend having is a hunting rifle. Now, I put a Remington Model 700 up there and a Winchester Model 70. I don't own a Remington Model 700 anymore, not because I didn't want it. It was my dad's, and my dad and someone else in my family inherited it when my dad passed away. But I inherited a Winchester Model 70, pre-64. Now, why do I say hunting rifles are a good thing to have to influence the 2A culture? It's inevitable those same people with the AR-15, especially with males, that when they're like, well, they're still stubborn because you're proving them wrong. This is a good example of they make more powerful guns. So the argument that the AR-15 is some death machine or the AK is some death machine, that they are, but not in the ways they're thinking, and that they're overpowered and that they have no place. When you let them shoot something like a 270 or 30-06 or even a 308, they notice right away that there's a different power curve. And that influences people. The other thing it does is I have a lot of people that I've introduced that are bow hunters that haven't shot rifles before. And they're getting into like riflery now to hunt deer and elk because of me. But they didn't have exposure and didn't have anybody they knew of that had said rifle. And when I told them, hey, I have a 270 or have an 06, if you want to try it, let's go. Now, this is where ammunition becomes expensive, really expensive for hunting ammunition, unless you hand load. And I'm a hand loader, and I trust my hand loads with my life, mostly because I've been doing it for years. And all told, I did the math for one of my friends, for Dex, and Dex and I were thinking about it. I have probably about 80 years of reloading experience to build on, and I'm only 45. Now, why? My uncles, between my uncles and my father, between the years that they have had, and they've trained me and my brothers, and the years I have myself physically doing it, and my friends, all told, it's about 80 years of experience and training in hand loading. So my reloads go boom. And I don't have any duds unless I get bad primers, and that's only happened one time. And I stay away from that primer brand now, but it probably is fine because it was a CCI primer, and I'm not dissing CCI. This was a primer that probably went past its shelf life. One thing about reloaders is we tend to stick to certain brands or certain items. Like we stock primers at home, we stock our favorite powders, which has been a good thing now since there's been a fire at Hodgins plant, which caused a lot of powder to not be on the market right now. I think they've just spun up their new facility. And then DuPont had some sort of issue with the EPA, which reduced powder also. So there's been a powder drought, sort of. But when you start talking about being an ambassador to the 2A, this is a good gun to have to just finish it off. Now, I have some wild cards here. Let's see what I got here. The reason why I would say wild cards, I didn't get pictures of them. Your carry gun. So like a Glock 19 or a SIG, any of the SIG line, or a Smith & Wesson, any of those pistols, because if they're interested in self-defense, this is one of those categories I kind of push them down or lead them to, if they're going to carry. Okay. Now, and if they just want one for a nightstand safe. Okay. Now, I always advocate, and I go through a little safety run through before I ever start a shooting session with anybody, unless I know that the person I'm shooting with has been a 2A guy or 2A girl for a while and has had multiple sessions under their belt. I stress the don't point a gun at anybody ever, whether it's loaded or not, because don't point it at anything unless you want to destroy it, right? Keep your finger off the trigger. And then we go through the mechanics of what a firearm is. We go through the 4 rules, like I was saying, but it's to get them in that safety zone so that they know this is a safe space in the 2A. And if you're taking leftist, that safe space word is a good buzzword to use, because what we're doing here, or trying to do, is defeat the stigma around the firearm. And nowhere is that more present as it is now with everybody on the left right now, I should say, and a lot of rhinos that are going after the 2A. So thinking about the podcast, thinking about how we can influence, or how I could influence culture, other than just trying to keep you informed about the politics around this, because the politics are intense. And we find a lot of zombie zealots that know nothing about firearms. And the best way to defeat that, I've found, is invite them to go shooting. Yeah, it may cost you a little bit of money for the ammunition, but you'll probably get someone who's changed their mind entirely, especially around something like the black rifles. The black rifle, as I said, is the most stigmatized item in anyone's gun collection. It's also the coolest one. And if you're shooting with teenage boys specifically, my sons have their friends. My sons are dyed-in-the-wool Mandalorian kids who say, yeah, I've got guns. And they do. They're mine on paper, and they're mine until a certain age. But they have guns that I've built specifically for them that they're gonna use and that they do use. But this is how my dad did it to me. Now, my dad didn't have 1,000 or millions of dollars, and neither do I. So my first black rifle was the Kalashnikov. It's simple. It was affordable. Nowadays, you're going to pay for a good Kalashnikov probably about as much as you would for a good AR. But what you get different with the AK and the AR is compatibility. If they want the video game gun, they're probably not going to want the Kalashnikov because they can't accessorize it as heavily as they could the M4 or the M16 or the AR-15 derivatives that we have available in the civilian world. And if you have some pretty trick rifles like my John Wick inspired build for my AR-15, these guys flip when they shoot it because it's tuned. It's not a cheap piece of crap, even though it has some inexpensive components, specifically the upper and lower receivers are Palmetto State Armory, but they've been run through, and my guns have been solid from Palmetto. That's why I'm a big fan of them. Like, share, subscribe, be great.